Welcome to today's Mentor Core event. We are on our summer schedule, so it's been a little lighter during the summer than it has been for the prior year, but we are thrilled to have Maeve with us today, Maeve O'Neill. My name is Lisa Beth Lentini Walker. I am a compliance, ethics, and corporate governance strategist, and I run the consultancy Lumen Worldwide Endeavors. Dan and I, my co-founder here, started Mentor Core, golly, it's over a year ago, when we thought that it was really important, and we continue to believe that it's really important that we build robust cross-functional communities, especially for the compliance, risk, and ethics professions and security, because we are seeing so many overlaps, so many ways that we need to support each other, both from a technical perspective, but especially from a human perspective. So I've taken up a bunch of airtime here, but Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Luckily, we're not charging Super Bowl rates for airtime, or
Right? I
maybe I
think I
wish we were.
exceeded capacity.
Hi, hey Lisa Beth. Hi everybody. I'm Dan Ayala. I'm by day I'm a security and privacy strategic advisor and virtual CISO and chief privacy officer for businesses through my business Socratic. But where my passion lies equally in making sure that people can get to the roles, to the levels, and to the health that they want, to the life, that a balanced life that they want. And that's where Mentor Core came in. The ability to take these guardian professions: security, privacy, risk, compliance, ethics, governance, spend our days watching over organizations, but don't always take the time to watch over ourselves in our own careers. So that's why we're here. And today is really right into that. Right into that topic. And we're lucky to have Maeve O'Neill join us. Maeve, welcome. We're very excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I love the intros you guys gave because I feel like I'm newer to the compliance space than you guys. You guys are very experienced. I'm probably 5-6 years doing mostly compliance with a lot of history before that. I could talk about if needed, other stuff, but I like the veterans who are in the industry who kind of see the same way I do. So it makes me feel hopeful for what we're doing in the arena and what we're going to build going forward.
Great. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you are doing and some of the places where you find your strength and your passion.
Okay, love it. Thank you. Well, I think I want to start kind of saying present state, what I'm doing and what I think and why this is so important to me, and then kind of backtrack a little, maybe how I got here. I currently work as the Chief Regulatory Officer, basically compliance officer, Rogers Behavioral Health, based out of Wisconsin. We're a psychiatric provider. We have 3 psychiatric hospitals in Wisconsin, about 20 residential facilities for mental health and addiction. And then we're in 9 other states providing outpatient care for mental health addiction for adolescents, children, and adults. So we're all over the place, serving thousands of people every day. And I'm really proud to lead that team of people where we get to do everything compliance. And one of the mantras I'm always saying to my staff and to the team and leadership that I work with is, to me, a healthy, well staff is an ethical and compliant staff, right? You can't just make someone be ethical and compliant. We've got to build a roadmap and set the stage and give the foundation if we're going to get there. You can't just beat them over the head with it, I don't believe. If someone's found a way to do that, please let me know. I'm open to that, but that's not the approach that I have found to be helpful. So luckily for me, I have been in behavioral health for my whole life, really over 30 years. It's sort of all I've ever done is worked in behavioral health. So I spent the first 10 years in direct care in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. I worked in just about every setting for behavioral health, every type of population, every type of issue. I worked in community settings. I worked in psych hospitals, treatment centers, schools, community-based organizations, doing everything from prevention, intervention, and then of course, treatment and recovery stuff. And in that time, I was going to school, getting my undergrad, getting my graduate degree, and getting licensed as a professional counselor and a chemical dependency counselor. and love that. Got a lot of really good experience and information as a foundation of sort of helping and serving people. And then I spent about 10 years in the management role in behavioral health, where I managed an outpatient program, residential program. I managed other sort of organizational startups or turnaround programs, helping to kind of implement policies and procedures and kind of do all the stuff now that I get to focus on. And then I spent the last 10 years in more executive leadership type positions, where I've run full regions or as a CEO of treatment organizations in different states and different organizational structures. So I've got to go from kind of doing the direct care, managing it, directing it, and now overseeing it. And as I said, the last 5 or 6 years, just in the compliance space, where I feel like it's a perfect combination of my clinical knowledge to my administrative experience, and then my leadership experience of how to do all of that better and well to be more compliant and ethical.
Very interesting.
Wow.
That's a really neat confluence. I think that's been the best part about this whole MentorCore experience, is finding how people got to where they are and realizing there's so many paths and so much breadth that comes into these fields. It just amazes me at every turn.
Yeah, I think I'm one of the lucky ones that I think I found my dream job. I always tell people, this is my dream. This is what I want to do. I think I'm good at it. I think I can do it well, and I love doing it. I don't want to do anything else. What do you want to do this? Do you want to go over here? No, I really don't. I just want to do this. I just want to keep learning and growing in this space. Not everyone gets to find their ideal dream job. So I also see as part of my role to help people find that. If it isn't compliance, great. If it's not, maybe it's in quality, maybe it's over here in direct care again, whatever it is. So I like being able to help people find what they want to do.
So I have to ask the question. You are a counselor, right? You're certified as a counselor. How does that help you in this profession, in the compliance profession? What skills did you learn that were valuable?
Great question. Some days I think, is it not the right experience or history? Because sometimes my clinical stuff gets in the way of just the compliance stuff. But most days I feel like it's great, because I obviously learned how to listen to people, how to consider the full experience of people. In counseling, we look at the biopsychosocial of a person, right? What is their family history, genetically, biologically? What is their current social setting? What is their psychological makeup? Is there traumas they've been through? Is there experiences at work or school or in their neighborhoods that might be impacting them, any trauma-based kind of issues? So doing a full assessment and then a treatment plan that meets those needs is what I've been doing for 30 years. So applying that same thought to compliance is sort of a risk assessment, right? We look at all parts, all pieces, make a plan, and then evaluate and see the success of that plan. So I think it's very similar. Just like in clinical work and compliance work, it's easy to get lost in the daily fires and just putting stuff out. But without that assessment and plan, I think we're missing the bigger issues or trends. So in that sense, I think it's very applicable. And in behavioral health, and I'm guessing it applies to other industries that you all are in, I think it's the people side of things. That being a counselor for 30 years, I feel like I've pretty much seen everything that people go through or experience. So it gives me an understanding of if someone does something unethical or not compliant, I'm probably less likely to be like, what? Why would they do that? I kind of know probably why they did it, right? There's a history there, there's an understanding there. So I understand human nature. I understand why people do what they do. I probably have a worse story to share. If someone's got a bad story, oh, you wouldn't believe this, right? I mean, it's pretty bad stuff. So there's maybe sort of like nothing's a crisis, because I've dealt with life and death crises on a daily basis. So sometimes the compliance stuff is like, is that really, as big a deal as it needs to be? Let's just manage it, mitigate it, and move on.
I love how you connect those two professions, because, now that you say it, it makes a lot of sense to me. It makes a lot of sense to me. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's how those skills fit. And I think that's a great thing for people to remember, like as they're interviewing for jobs, especially if they're changing industries. How do those parts and pieces fit together and become skills that are transferable across different professions?
One thing I have learned in my compliance work is you can't know everything. We cannot be the expert in all things compliance, right? There's just so much. I could be expert in one clinical, whether it's like folks, I am a huge expert in addiction treatment. Well, I can get pretty expert in that, but I may not be so good in eating disorder or other kind of stuff. I have to get other individuals, other experts involved, do some more research. And in compliance, it's the same thing. I can't know everything. I need someone else who's good at privacy or security or whatever it is. So to me, it's also just knowing our limits and not feeling like we have to know everything.
So as a 25-year investigator, I think I have a good understanding of what drives people to do things in my field, in our fields. I guess, how has understanding the psychology of it made it, I guess, harder or easier to do your job? And do you find that you end up like, I guess, getting compassion for the reason people do it because you understand the deep seeds? Or does it make it harder or easier is the root question there? A lot of subparts, but
yeah, probably a little bit of both, right? Because there's some days where I probably need to not be so understanding or, just, more directive, not okay, do this, I could never be an attorney. I realized they kind of live in that black and white, and I live my life in the gray. I'm always able to kind of, well, what about this or that? So I'm definitely not a legal person. So I think it helps in that I'm able to understand kind of, I don't believe that people just do bad things. I don't believe that people just make the choice to be non-compliant or unethical. I think sometimes it happens and there's probably a reason why. Of course, there are people that are diagnosably mentally ill or pathological. That somebody does exist. And I've supervised those people and worked with those people and worked for those people. But I think most people are doing the best that they can. And it's usually an opportunity for education or reminders or better systemic things we can build. So that idea, I guess, leading with grace of, okay, obviously we missed something here. How do we fix it? How do we address it? I think Lisa Beth had mentioned the whole Brene Brown thing, which sort of how I lead my life personally and professionally gives me that background too of how to see things, not just mental health wise, but just from a humanity side that I think for me is the right way to approach ethics and compliance. Some people might say it's too soft or too, forgiving, but for me, it works well and has allowed me to feel good about the work that I get to do.
I typically hear, woo-woo is something that I hear.
Yeah.
Because I think that I'm very much an advocate of total wellness in order to be a good guardian, right? You can't have people who are feeling ill or not at their best making really tough decisions because there are other things, that are distractions. So you mentioned Brené Brown. So let's go there. Like, what inspired you to start, following Brené Brown? Because you're certified to provide that training, if I'm recalling correctly. Like, give us the deets on that. Like, what are all the details behind that, and how does that play out in your everyday life?
Yeah. Well, if you don't know, Brene Brown is a researcher out of Houston who has developed some great curriculums on resilience. 10, 15 years ago, it was around women and shame, then it became families and shame, and then it was sort of society and shame, and now it's actually applied to leadership and shame and organization. So it's kind of her research and work has sort of followed my path from applying it to me and then to my program, and now as a leader. I got lucky where it just came into my organization. I guess it was 2013. So it's been about 8 years ago. I worked for a place that introduced it to me and said, hey, there's this person, we're all going to get trained in this work. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Because at the time I had just personally left a job where I ran a large nonprofit region here in the Texas area where I burned out. I was burned out, not in a good place. I left that large place and took a smaller role running one facility because I just needed some more calm and sanity in my life. And just that pace and that grind was not sustainable. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was drinking 3 Red Bulls a day just to kind of stay, ready enough to meet the challenges of the day and the night and the weekends. And it wasn't good. So I was already burned out. And then this came in, it's like, oh, here you go. This is an alternative to burning out again. and got the training. There was about 50 of us in the organization that got trained. 3 people in my program and myself, and then the others were all around the country. And when I went back to the program, started applying the work with the patients and with the staff, it was so transformative. I was stunned at how quickly embracing the language and the activities and sort of the way of viewing the world, all of a sudden we saw patient incidents go down, staff incidents went down, patient AMAs went down against medical advice, leaving the program.
Mm-hmm.
Staff turnover went down, patient and staff satisfaction went up. And it was sort of this magical thing of like, wow, this is amazing. When we give people the tools that help us, it just sort of shifts everything. It was just a magical thing to see. And then applying it a couple more places that I then went to work from there, it kept happening over and over again. Like, wow, this is really incredible, this work. And at the same time, Brene was doing her Dare to Lead research. And then she came out with the book a few years ago, which was then applying it to workplaces. I was already doing it. I wasn't supposed to be necessarily, but I was doing it and using the shame tools, shame resilience tools in workplaces. And it was just incredible to see it. And then once the book came out, those of us that were trained in her daring way got to get trained in Dare to Lead. And now we apply that work in organizations, and there's assessments to do, and there's evaluations to take, and you really get to tailor it for each organization that you work with. So it's really cool. There's probably maybe 300 of us or so that are trained around the country. The curriculum just went from 16 hours to 24 hours because she's added a whole piece about equity and diversion and inclusion, which has been obviously another societal focus as well. And people are hiring that position and adding those sort of teams. So right on target as usual, she's sort of state of the art, adding those things. And I think the beauty of it is that you can apply it to yourself. Like, here's what I can do different. You can apply it to your team. And as an organizational culture, you can look at it as where are we in this and what can we do better? And then personally, I use it in my personal life, in relationship with my parent, with my children, and just in kind of who I want to be in the world. It kind of creates this clarity about, well, this is who I want to be. Am I in line with that or not? And if so, how do I get there? And I kind of knew I was doing it right when a couple years ago, I think something was happening in the racial injustice or something in the world. And my son turned to me and said, so what would Brene Brown say about this? And I knew I had infused it just the right amount.
That's a mom moment. That's a mom moment.
It was pretty great. So I knew that it even works with a 15-year-old boy who's wondering about life. So that was pretty cool at the time.
That's amazing. So as you think about this, what inspired you to like follow through and get yourself that additional training after having been through the program? Did you see it as like a personal benefit or something that you could use and work automatically? Like, tell us about what the decisions to get to, you know what, I'm going to become like one of the trainers and not just a recipient of training. I'm going to become a trainer in this, and kind of what that looked like along that path, because there's some decisions about priorities there that you had to make.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because initially when I got trained in the Daring Way, the company put us through that at great financial expense. It was amazing what a gift they gave us. But after that, it was on me because I didn't work for that place anymore. And it was financially still, it's not cheap to maintain it and do it. But seeing the impact of it in my life with my children and with the organizations that I work with, it's almost hard to describe, but to me, it gives you the ability to name something. You know, we talk a lot about health in organizations, and especially in behavioral health. I think sometimes we attract people who want to fix other people. And as compliance officers, I think we want to control or do or manage, you know, everything. And oftentimes the work just has to start with ourselves. So the fact that it makes you kind of look at yourself first, rather than diagnosing someone or saying it's this policy or it's this process or it's this department, you know, it's so easy to sort of say it's something or someone else, but the work. What I do now at my workplace with my team of 11 people, every Wednesday we spend a half hour going through Dare to Lead. So I built it into our weekly structure.
Oh,
So the goal is
interesting.
in 12 months, they will have gotten all 24 hours is sort of what I built out. So they'll all be certified Dare to Lead at the end of the year. We're taking very manageable half-hour chunks every week. And today we talked about that, like, it's hard when the work is on you. So many trainings we go to, check it, done, got it, got that certification or that knowledge or that curriculum, sort of in my back pocket. But Brené's work isn't that easy, unfortunately. It's sort of every day you do it. Some days it goes well and you say, good job. And some days you mess it up and say, oh, I missed that. I got to go back and fix this. So it's that internal work of always being aware of yourself, using the 4 skills that are built into Dare to Lead, and then applying them to yourself and then with everybody else. So there's always something more and better we can do. And then when you see these aha moments in the team and in the people kind of go, oh, this is what that is, or they use the language of armor or vulnerability or rising, the kind of things that we talk about. I just think it creates an environment where people can thrive, both personally and professionally.
That's great. Maeve, for those that are listening and watching and haven't had exposure to Brené Brown, could you synopsize some of the philosophy or approach just in a nutshell?
Yeah, and I would refer people to her website, brenebrown.com. All the 6, 7 books are there and listed. I always encourage people to start with the beginning, start with the gifts of imperfection, and kind of work your way up. And as you see her knowledge kind of build, you kind of see how they all kind of work together, which is really cool. You can always go to Oprah's Soul Sunday. She's on some of that. She's got a podcast now. There was a Netflix special about 1.5 years ago that she did right before the pandemic, I guess. So that's called The Call to Courage. That's an hour-long Netflix special that's easy to kind of digest. But in general, the way she teaches shame resilience is that we have to name shame, kind of what it is, that shame isn't just another feeling, it's actually an experience that we're not worthy of love and belonging. And therefore we do things that are not helpful in our lives. We act out shame, we shame others. I think we do unethical and non-compliant things because we're stuck in that shame spiral or that judgment or negativity stuff. So the curriculum builds on these 4 skill sets of leadership and of resilience that helps us avoid those scarcity and shame sort of gremlins, as she calls them, that we go down naturally. So the 4 skill sets are, one is vulnerability, which is just basically kind of, being authentic, being who we are, not having all the answers, not knowing everything, and being willing to admit that we don't know everything. Especially as compliance people, sometimes, I don't know about you all, but we get thousands of calls every day of, what about this, what about that? And we're supposed to know everything and know all the answers and be able to advise all the time, right? And saying, I don't know, I'm not sure, what do you think? That's a vulnerable place to be. It's easier to say, do this, and that's the answer. So vulnerability is actually, of a 24-hour curriculum, it's probably a good 8 hours of work that we dive into. What is vulnerability? What is it not? What does it look like for you, for me, for our team, for our organization? And then how to manage vulnerability, how to do it well. Doesn't mean it's self-disclosure or telling people everything, but it's being vulnerable and open enough that people want to connect with you. And then once you kind of got that down, we get into our values. What values drive us once we're being vulnerable? If you're not clear about your values, it's easy to be unethical or be non-compliant, right? Because it's like, well, I'll do whatever someone tells me to do, or I'll do what I feel like that day without any grounding of the value of the organization or the value of me as a professional. I know for me in my career, it's been those like, no, I can't do that, or no, I won't do that. My license, I'll get in trouble. And when I've been asked to do things unethical, that always has guided me well. And then after values and vulnerability, it's about trust. So now we're building trust in ourselves, trust in our teams, trust in the organization as a whole, that we have the right people and resources to get the job done. And then if trust doesn't exist, how to build it, how to repair it if it gets hurt. So a lot of work around trust building and what that looks like. And the last piece is that rising piece, that when we mess up the other 3, how do we come back from it? You're not going to trust me. I'm going to mess up the trust. I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm just going to be sort of maybe the opposite of vulnerable and just shaming or difficult. Or maybe you see me outside of my values, and well, maybe really is usually really honest, but I don't think she's being honest in that situation. What do we do with this? So it forces us to come back and have some tough conversations, to talk about the courage and compassion and connection needed to do this work. You'll see at breneebrown.com is a lot of, I just call fridge material. There's great, the guidepost to wholehearted living, or rumbling tools, or there's other sort of visual reminders of this is what trust is. We have an acronym for trust called BRAVING, which is all about the 7 elements of what trust is and how it gets built. It's not just like, well, trust me, because I used to believe early on in my career, well, I'm your boss, so you should trust me, right? That should just be immediate. And I quickly learned
such that it were that easy.
I wish it was that easy, right? So I had to learn, oh, I've got to build this thing called trust. And I've got to figure out well, if Maeve doesn't trust me, why? Or if Lisa Beth doesn't, but Dan does, what is that about? So it's all this work you got to do, right? It's kind of exhausting, but it's worth it in the end to dive into that. And she just gives us the tools and the language to do it on a daily basis.
Wow. That's, this is all amazing. So as we talk about resilience, I mean, okay, so that may have been the word of 2020, and I think we're going into 2021, and I think it's still remaining the word. What do you think the role of compliance and ethics professionals is when it comes to resilience, and especially in challenging times?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, I think for me in behavioral health, and I imagine in some other industries, it's more mature because we're kind of newer to compliance. In my 30 years, I would say my first 10 years, we didn't have compliance officers, departments, people at all. We all kind of did compliance. Now that I know what it is, we all just kind of did it. The last 15 years or so, I've had some places that had a compliance person, maybe a department, but it was sort of that person that came in when someone was in trouble, right? Someone messed up, so here's compliance, and someone's probably getting fired. It was sort of my experience of compliance. Or it was just sort of do this, don't do this, here's the legal stuff, and let's just sort of not worry about it. So I had never experienced a compliance department like I wanted to build, or I was in my vision. But I was quite thrilled when I went to HCCA's academy and I got my CHC training, because I felt that they got it. They knew, I think, what I was wanting to build, and I heard people talk about it, and there were sessions on sort of what my vision was, even though it wasn't quite geared to my experience in behavioral health. At least it was giving me sort of the seeds. Oh yeah, I want to do that. The bits and pieces of I thought would build what I thought would be ideal. Because I think what we've experienced in the last year with the pandemic and just life in general, behavioral health is a huge need across the board for many, many people. Certainly the acute mental health issues that we deal with, but also in our outpatient programs, the people that go home every day, they also need it. And in the last year, it really comes like that our staff really need it. So to me, I would love to believe that compliance should be integrated with, the wellness or the employee assistance. I don't think you can separate the two. I think if we don't have a similar shared message, it kind of gets lost. That's kind of been my experience of, we'll go do this self-care activity, or go do this compassion fatigue experience, or this employee thing over here. Or I remember early on, as I was sort of getting people to kind of, what are you doing for your employees? How are you helping them to be ethical and compliant and well? And I had a CEO say to me, well, we had a staff wellness day. We had a clown come out, spent the day with the clown, and I think we're good for the year. And I remember thinking, it may not be enough, right?
Like ethics training, just once a year. That's all you need.
Terrifying people.
Yeah, and some people traumatized by it, right? Never mind those poor people. Yeah, but I think that's the vision. Like, well, we did this, check the box. We provided, cookies last week.
Right, as some of the same problems just in general that you see with information security, compliance. Like, how can we check the box and make the pain go away and then say that we did it? But the question then becomes like, what's the impact and how is it sustainable?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about Brene's work being the way to integrate it, because it's a way in too. People really have loved Brene's work, even if not in healthcare and compliance, in the general public has embraced it, right? That's why she's so popular now and has sold, I think, millions of books, the most watched TED Talk, I think maybe. I mean, is it incredible, the knowledge. I forgot to mention her 2 TED Talks earlier. Yeah, she's got 2 TED Talks, one on shame and one on vulnerability. So I think it gives you sort of this, it's not an academic or technical language. It's everyone can understand it. It's accessible and yet so powerful when it's applied to ethics, compliance, or a way to be healthy and well. It kind of just gives you that roadmap to me, which has been really magical.
So what a gift that you are giving to your team by having them be able to be trained as trainers over the course of a year. So let's talk a little bit about what this means from a mentoring standpoint, because at MentorCore, we are all about the mentoring and, paying it forward. So what does this mean for you, and how are you manifesting that um, in your life?
Oh, that's very good. Well, so first, just to clarify, so to give the curriculum of Brené's stuff, you have to be what the title is, Certified Dare to Lead Facilitator. So it's CDTFL. So we've been trained by Brené and her team to deliver the curriculum, which then allows us to train people to get certified Dare to Lead. They can't give the curriculum, but they have the knowledge of the curriculum and can then share it with other people and use it themselves. And a new thing that Brené just added this last year was now we can sort of certify teams of people. So we can get a team certified and then they can share it with other people on their team. So that's sort of like spreading the wealth out a little bit. You don't have to get certified and do the training, but you can spread the knowledge and the wisdom of what it is. So that I think is a pretty powerful way to bring it to the masses and to the people who need it really. And I think the way it works for me is that my team expresses every week that I do this, and we've been doing it now since I guess January 1 with this team, is every week I get a thank you, just what I needed. Oh my gosh, that's just what I heard. I needed to know today about empathy or compassion or boundaries, trust, those kind of things. So to me, it's like an acknowledgement that this is not easy. This is hard work that we do. The pandemic has been hard. And I feel like there's a little bit of a gift I get to give them, right? It's almost like, it's not cookies, it's not a clown, but it is like a weekly gift of, hey, do you guys have this knowledge? Are you focused on this? Don't forget that we have this, information over here. Are we using it? Are we applying it? And there's some of the basic things that Brené has taught me is starting a meeting with a quick check-in. How's everybody doing? A quick sort of just a run around. We get so focused on who's got what today, what fires are we putting out. Just a check-in that takes 2 minutes can be really powerful on a team. And the other new technique she's taught us is sort of that ability to be in 2 places. I can be really happy and good and also scared and vulnerable that something's not going to go well today. And how do we navigate the high and low, good and bad of that using the skill set? So it allows me to model that for the people. So I think I'm being a mentor to my team to say, boy, it's been a rough week. Here's what I'm feeling, thinking, needing. What about you guys? And then I see them mentoring each other and helping each other to get to it. And then, so we have a team of 11 people and we have a staff around the country of over 2,000, almost 3,000 people. So they're mentors for each of their levels of care that they're managing and role setting and modeling the same behavior for. So to me, it's like the mentor, hierarchy of sort of pushing it down and doing that really well is important to me. And we'll identify opportunities. So here's a challenge someone's having at this hospital. Well, let's see, is that a trust issue? Is it a vulnerability issue? Is it shame? Kind of what's showing up there? And how do we help support that? Maybe it's a policy reminder, but we don't have to shame them about not knowing the policy, right? So we're going to do the compliance stuff, but the way we do it hopefully never adds to the shame and scarcity that drives poor care.
2 things. One, you mentioned about things like check-ins and just having those kinds of conversations. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of the style of doing those versus just the act of doing them? I've seen recent reports in which people now 18 months, 15, 16, 17 months into a pandemic, the check-in was something that was done initially as people were moving to more remote work. But now I've started to see more in which people are saying this has become, it's stopped being useful. It's started becoming more of management rather than leadership. More of the nature of it has changed. Can you talk a little about the style that makes for an effective check-in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I find we drift into it too, right? I'll say this half hour is not about our work that we do. I don't want to hear about incidents or mock surveys or anything work related, right? It's really for us and how we are and how we're doing the work, but not the work. And everyone will always sneak in, well, there's this thing going on. I always sort of bring it back to, well, let's talk about how it applies to the skill building that we're doing and the resilience, because we've got all day to talk about that incident or that issue or that problem or that risk. This 30 minutes is just dedicated for us to do that check-in. But it's so easy to drift into this. I just want to fix it or want to do it. The style for me is just a gentle reminder of this is the time to focus on it. And I think early on too, I realized this doesn't come naturally or easy for anyone, and especially for us in behavioral health, we think we know it and do it well, but we really don't. I'm sorry if anyone's on behavioral health out there, I'm not trying to call us out, but because we're licensed and we're clinicians and we help people be well every day, we're sometimes the worst ones at actually doing it and practicing it.
The cobbler's children, right?
Yeah.
Totally. We recently went through a leadership training and we had, I think it was probably 20 hours, and we spent like 15 minutes on health and wellness. And I remember saying to the group, every other session on conflict resolution or communication skills are like days and hours long. Why would we only spend 15 minutes on health and wellness? And they said to us, well, you guys are Rogers Behavioral Health. We thought you had that licked. I'm like, oh, that's the misunderstanding, is that we don't need mental health because we work in mental health. And it's probably the opposite. We probably need 3 times as much. But we don't need the mental health stuff. We need resilience. We need the tools, which is why Brené's stuff is, I think, such the perfect fit. Is we need to know how to manage it and direct it without it being a diagnosable mental health condition or even a touchy-feely kind of, oh, let's take care of ourselves. I really feel like it's taking care of each other and the organization's mission by doing this work. So I try to make it not too touchy-feely, not too counseling, but truly building the skills to be resilient in everything that we do. So that, and a lot of the style is just modeling that for them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and touch the live wire. You ready for this? So we are now at we're in the Olympics are happening right now. There's been, I think, the emergence of a national dialogue around elite athletes, sports, mental health, wellness, what that looks like. So we had Simone Biles pull herself out and say, I can't do this. I'm going to impair the team because I am not in a good headspace. We saw Naomi Osaka pull out of tennis for similar reasons. Where do you think this is going? Are we going to, there have been study after study about, health and well-being in the workplace, and it still doesn't seem to have much of a dent. Is this going to be something? Is this going to be something we're talking about for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
And how can we help keep it in the consciousness? Because I think I'll just weigh in my own personal, I think this is key to getting people to understand that this all applies to them, to all of us.
Overdue.
Totally, right? I know. I remember early on when I got in the field, I came from a family of origin that was not healthy, that was not well, that was mired with addiction and mental health issues. And I thought at 18 years old, I was just going to change the world. There would never be another abused child. There would never be another family that had alcoholism and drug addiction in it. I was going to fix it, right? And here I am 30 years later going, oh, I guess I didn't fix it. Maybe I made an impact or a dent, but we're not going to fix it, but we have to at least acknowledge it. So I love that is happening. I mean, I remember Michael Phelps when he first came out about talking about it, and then these 2 young women. It's just such a perfect, I think, example of where we all could get to if we are vulnerable and safe enough to do it. It's perfect. What if we all did that and could do? I remember when I was burning out, as I mentioned about 8 years ago, and I went to my boss. And she had been my boss. This is her third time being my boss. My first job ever in the industry in behavioral health. She was my boss. I was 18 years old and she was my boss in the treatment center. 10 years later, she hired me again to run a treatment center. And then here we go 10 years, 20 years later now. Every 10 years, she comes in and changes my life. And she always tells me, you're the healthiest person I know in this industry. So she keeps hiring me over and over again, which is kind of scary to think that, of all of her experience, that would be the healthiest. But as I was burning out, I said to her, like, something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong. I am irritable. I am tired. I'm not sleeping. And this is the woman who I know loves me and loves my children and has for, at that point, 20 some years, she's cared for me. She looked at me and she said, I don't know what to tell you, Maeve, do more yoga or something. That was the quote. And that was the best she had, because my guess is she too was probably burning out or burned out or didn't know what to do. And I think that is just epidemic, that we don't know what to do. We don't have the words to explain it. I don't know that I was depressed. I don't think I had anxiety, but I just wasn't doing on a daily basis what I need to do to be well, to avoid burnout. And we're all just sort of spinning around this thing of doing, as Simone said, doing what the world expects, doing what's needed. The next day, this is expected, this is needed. The board wants this, the staff want that, the regulators want this. So it's just that pace of trying to keep it going. So when she said to me, do more yoga, I was like, oh, you're right. Yes, I should do more yoga. That should fix it.
24-hour-a-day yoga.
Yeah, exactly. I'll have to take a week off to do more yoga, right? But the truth is, she was right in that I did need to do something every day. And so since burning out and since getting Brené's stuff, I do have now a daily practice of yoga and meditation, which does, I think, keep me a little more sane, a little more resilient and focused. And Brené talks about in the curriculum having a mindfulness practice, whatever that might look like for people, whether it's music or nature or exercise or cooking. There's a million things we can do that are healthy and helpful, that are not numbing, which is what we tend to do, right? We sit in front of TV for hours, or we go shopping, or we do social media, or we eat unhealthy stuff. We kind of numb it rather than really be mindful of what would help to fill me, not just drain me. So I love it when my staff can look at me and go, did you miss that yoga or that meditation today? Because you seem a little edgy, right? That's part of that vulnerability too, is like, yeah, I probably need to get back to that. But what I found too is that, which I love about the athletes, is there are certainly examples. Who is that basketball coach? Was it the Knicks who had that basketball coach who they did meditation and mindfulness and yoga with the team, the big tall guy? I can't remember his name right now. But there's examples in professional sports of people who have done this for years and years and years, probably 20, 30 years, but behavioral health, we haven't integrated it. My son now he plays football at Rice University, and his head coach has asked me to do Dare to Lead with the team and the coaches. So they want to bring it, to their knowledge. So because they're in Houston, they know Brené, because Brené's in Houston too. So there's professional teams, there's Fortune 500 companies, there's retail, military that are doing Brené stuff and doing yoga and meditation. And I just wish it was more common or acceptable to do it everywhere as a workplace. And I don't think it can just be an option. I think it has to be almost like a required, integrated, hey, Maeve, it's your turn to get to the meditation booth, right? This is your time. We all need to schedule a time as part of our work day, or every meeting starts with a breathing meditation. I do that sometimes. Required to sit and just listen to a music, or bring your favorite song or your family picture. Dan and I were talking about before we started, how nice the pandemic, we see people's kids and dogs and houses, and it has brought a human element to just, I see you more in a different light now, and I see you as a parent or as a puppy mom, and it does change how we see and take care of people, I think. So I'd love to see professional sports keep taking the lead, and then all of us sort of follow. How do we do it everywhere so it's not weird or national news that someone set a boundary? That would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Dan.
Without question. The one thing you mentioned that then triggered a thought in my head. One of the things that we talk about a lot with Mentor Core members and with people in all of our fields between compliance and security and risk is that of imposter syndrome. It's one that, and as you were talking about shame, and as you were talking about the ways that shame manifests itself in ourselves, imposter syndrome popped into my head as this thing that we're all I deal with it. I'll be quite open. I still wonder when they're going to figure out that I don't have any clue what I'm doing. Um,
Oh, Dan.
What's that?
Oh, Dan.
They already know, Dan. They just haven't told you. No.
Oh, good. Well, I put it on the website. I just disclaimer. Right. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But so how does I guess how does imposter syndrome affect our ability to be successful, and how can we start to think about ways to get out of that? As easy as it is to say, I'm no longer an imposter.
Right, exactly. You've changed it. Well, see, here's the weird thing, and people probably kind of get irritated with me, but I see everything through a Brene Brown lens, right? So to me, imposter syndrome is really just shame, right? If we have that feeling that we're not good enough, that is what shame is, right? We're unworthy of love and belonging because we don't have the right credentials, experience, expertise, whatever it is. That is shame. So it's overcoming the shame that gets us to not feel that way, to then not act that way, to then sort of, confirm or deny that we have imposter syndrome. And there's a lot of things in mental health that we do too. Like we have something called codependency. We call people codependent sometimes, or enabling, or we talk about not setting boundaries, or we talk about dysfunctional families. There's all these terms that you kind of hear the general public kind of throw around, I think, around mental health or organizational health or professional health. And really at the root of it is shame. So if we can get really good at naming, this is really shame for me. Why do I feel like an imposter? I don't feel, this is the shame piece. Working through that, all of a sudden, that's the shared, because the beauty about Brene's stuff is we don't all have to have imposter syndrome or a mental health in our family, but we all know shame. We all do. You cannot be human and not experience shame, whether it's in our families, in our communities, and in our professional lives. It is there. We just don't name it or acknowledge it or want to look at it. We're trying to avoid shame all the time. And sometimes we avoid it by being quiet. Sometimes we avoid it by being shaming to someone else. Or we just sort of freeze and just sort of hope it goes away. And like you said, hope they don't figure it out. So if we can get brave enough to just name that, oh, this is shame. What do I do with this? I think we might be able to really change that conversation about a lot of things that really are kind of shaming.
And is it the vocalness of it that helps to make it more normalized?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Brene says in her training, it's when you have shame and you cover it with empathy and compassion and shared experience, it goes away. It cannot live in an environment of empathy and compassion. It lives in an environment of scarcity and shame and judgment and negativity and criticism. That's where shame thrives,
So modern business.
Exactly. All of our workplaces,
yeah, exactly.
And our schools. Yeah, and our schools and our families. Yeah. It's everywhere. Exactly.
Wow. Well, and the funny thing is, and I'm going to turn this into a geeky securities law moment, right? Back in the 1930s, 1940s, one of the greats at the Securities and Exchange Commission and a great judge also said, sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. So bringing this out into the open can help clear some of what's there, right? Because the more you try to repress it, suppress it, deny it, etc., the more it festers.
Yep. And that applies to compliance, right? Because if we have an issue in compliance, we want to know about it, right? We don't want to hide it. We don't want to avoid. We have to know about it if we're going to prevent, find, or fix it. So we have to know it. And if we shame everyone that comes to us, they're not going to come to us anymore. They're not going to call our hotline. They're not going to bring things forward. They're just going to leave and not tell us, or they're going to stay and become dysfunctional themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. So with all of this, one of the things that we always ask at MentorCore is, what's the best advice that you've ever received from a mentor? And it sounds like you've had some pretty good ones over the years.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about this as I was prepping for the call, and I was thinking, I've had a lot of really good examples and a lot of really good guides. I've also had some really bad guides and bad mentors and bad leaders that help me know what I don't want to do or how I don't want to be. And those are probably the ones that said to me, well, we pay staff, why do we have to take care of them? That was, they're here, why do we have to like care about them? Firing people, writing people up. I was always told to be more harsh or grow a thicker skin, or I was too soft, that kind of thing. But I was realizing too that I always think of like mentors as like leaders, but it's also peers that I've worked with and people that I've sort of been on the equal grounds with. And then people that report to me over the years, I think have actually been really good mentors to me too, that without their feedback, without their example. I remember early on as a manager, I would have these younger people telling me, oh, I can't work weekends, or I don't answer my phone after 5 o'clock. And I just thought they were really the laziest, non-committed, loyal people. And I realized, oh no, they're actually really healthy and well, and I'm not. So I need to take this in and learn from this. But I think the best person, well, I guess I'd have to give you two if that's okay. One would be that
Perfect.
boss that I told you about, the do more yoga, because even though it sounds like it was awful and really bad advice, because it was coming from a place of love, I knew that she really cared for me. It meant a lot that I wish she could have just said, and I'll do it with you, or let's do it every Friday, or here's what I do, let's try this. I just wish it would have been more of a shared experience than just like that, the word self-care. I don't like, go take care of yourself. I want us to be like embrace it and do it together. And I remember one job I was at, it was rough. It was the most toxic work environment that I was working in. There was a lot going on, a lot happening, and I was infusing the Brene stuff and trying to get people to get on board, and people weren't happy. And it was like all these complaints and grievances and things happening because they were sort of shifting that toxic culture to a more wholehearted culture. And one of my peers reached out to me on a random Saturday afternoon with an email of just like, hey, I know it's hard. Keep your head up. We've all been there. Let me know if I can help. I remember it just brought me to tears. I was like, oh, he gets it. He knows I'm struggling. He took time out of an afternoon to reach out to me. And we weren't even that close, but I just knew that he knew. And I also knew that people were talking to him about what was going on with me. So that toxic kind of like communication thing was happening, but he chose to rise above that and just reach out to me with that advice of like, hey, focus on you, enjoy your weekend, don't worry about it. So I think that when things come at a genuine place of care and concern, we can get a lot accomplished and done to actually help people to do better.
That's fantastic. I love those pieces of advice.
Very good stuff. Well, unfortunately, I guess we have a couple more minutes, just if we want to just circle back around. Tell us a little bit about, are you doing any external coaching? Is it mostly for your teams? How else are you helping to manifest some of this across a wider audience?
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. So yeah, my job is very demanding right now, as I'm sure all of our jobs are very demanding right now. But where I can, I absolutely love that. I do a lot of speaking at conferences. I actually spoke at the HCCA conference a couple years ago. I'd call it a wholehearted journey to ethics, where I kind of infuse all this stuff into how to build an ethics and compliance program based on these concepts. For me, that's what I always want to do. And I hope in behavioral health, at least, I can get more people to do that, if not in more broader healthcare kind of things. So I would love to see us do more of that. Sort of just the awareness of compliance and ethics is health and wellness. So what do you do along with the policy and procedures and other stuff? How do you build in those kind of things? An example I will give is I went to one program where, my example was, hey, let's spend 5 minutes every morning sort of checking on us, doing something for us, was yoga, meditation, a song. And they didn't want to do it. And people didn't come at first. I sat in a room by myself probably for a couple of weeks until one guy came and the second person came. Before you know it, the whole team came. And as I was leaving the organization, they said to me, how do we keep this going? No one of us has this knowledge that you have. So what do we do? And they decided they were going to rotate it. They would each take a day of the week that they would maintain it. At first, they didn't think they needed it. And now they knew they needed it. So I think we kind of can't take no for an answer. We know people need this. Like Simone Biles said, we need to focus on our mindfulness, take a break, set a boundary, say no, take care of each other, right? If we can build that into our daily work flows and processes. It's not separate. It's not in addition to compliance. It should be how we get to compliance. I think that would be ideal. And if it's not Brene, maybe there's another person, because some people don't like Brene Brown, which is fine too. And people, I get that all the time, but that's okay. And she actually knows it too. In particular, she feels like white men sometimes don't like her, which is fine. So she says, don't show the videos, just do the work with certain people. That's okay. Some people don't like it. You have to be at a certain place, I think, of openness to kind of get her work. So that's okay too. Whatever it is, I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek. I use a lot of his stuff. I think he's amazing. There's a couple other people. Claude Silver is one. She's the chief heart officer. I love her.
Vaynerchuk's company.
Yeah. When I saw her job title of the chief heart officer, I was like, I need to talk to you. And she actually had a call with me. This was probably 3 years ago now. Got to have a phone call with her. I'm like, okay, first tell me how you got that job title. That's my dream job title. And we just talked and
I think
chatted.
You just kind of make it up, right?
Yeah.
I made it up. Yeah, that's what I want to do, be a heart officer. I love it. And then I got to meet her in Chattanooga, and we spent the evening together with a new group of people, like a Humans First organization that they've kind of got this model going with Mike McCanty. So there's a lot of great people out there doing this work, you know, in certain circles and places. And I just hope it becomes more mainstream, and with the athletes and organizations that are leading it, I think we can really make a difference in the world.
Well, on that note, I think that we can all choose to make a difference in how we interact with the world and what we're giving back to the world. And I'm just so thrilled that you were able to join us today and add to our Mentor Core constellation of stars who have helped to enrich this community and all of our professions. So thank you, Maeve.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Maeve. We really appreciate it. And for everybody else, we are going to be taking the month of August off, and we'll be back. So look for new events posted in August for beginning in early September after Labor Day, with a whole new agenda of talks, topics, and guests on Mentor Core. And we thank you for being part of our community. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the summer.